that have drivers. If you have any tips or advice for a new dad or a dad with a new driver, I welcome them. Feel free to send them in the chat. It's both exhilarating and freaking me out all at the same time. Also, a really proud husband. My wife, Jackie, is just, is my best friend in life. Huge music enthusiast and an avid conscious capitalist. So that's a little bit about me, the important stuff first from a career standpoint. Really lucky. Mary, thanks for the comment. Insurance is her tip. Yeah, totally. The first part of my career, I spent in the financial services business about 5 years before I had some inkling of what I wanted to be when I grew up. Not that that industry wasn't good to me, it was, and it taught me a lot. But from there, I was really fortunate to join jobbing.com, the job board, very early in its existence. I was the 5th employee there and was really lucky to be a part of that rocket ship growth. I was there 11 years. As part of that organization, which was really great. Learned a ton from there, transitioned to PF Chang's and Payway and led their talent acquisition for a short period of time and learned the difference between working in a high growth startup like Jobbing and a publicly traded large organization like PF Chang's. After that, decided to launch a purpose-based executive search firm called Y Scouts. Was really excited about the opportunity to carve out a new niche in the executive search space and really identify the connection between people and organizations beyond just the job description resume match, and really bringing in all of the, I think, really intangible factors that are, in my opinion, the greatest accelerators of performance. Following my love of conscious capitalism, spent some time as the president of our Arizona chapter here. And then in early part of 2020, launched a startup called Anthem, which is all about helping teams accelerate trust and connection in the workplace. And we started it pre-COVID, and who would have known that given what has happened over the last 7-8 months of this year, of the timeliness and the need that exists for connection, which I think is probably a good way to sort of lead us into our discussion today. And I have to say right off the bat that while I've spent now 20 plus years in the people culture space in some capacity, that given how unprecedented this year has been, I actually have a lot more questions than I do answers. I'm going to provide some insight and some data points that I think are pretty telling of what's happening right now, whether or not it's an indicator of where we're going to be. I think, anybody claiming to be an expert on this at the moment, I would just, I don't know. I have questions, more questions than I do answers. But with that said, I want to share one of my favorite quotes of the year, a Vladimir Lenin quote of, there are decades where nothing happens and there are weeks where decades happen. And I think 2020 is undoubtedly very fitting, or this quote is very fitting for what we've experienced here in 2020. And again, this just sort of highlights where so much has happened in the last 7-8 months that, I have more questions than I do answers. So just kind of a quick sort of reflective moment to think about where we've actually come from. Obviously, this session today talking about how to improve your culture in a work from home environment or work from anywhere environment. Where did we come from? Prior to the pandemic, approximately 7% of employees here in the United States had access to a flexible workplace or some sort of a telework benefit. And so to think about that number at how far we've come in such a short period of time and how many people, while I can't see everybody on their screens today, those that I can see, I would make a guess that many of you are working in a home office of some kind. And it really is this unprecedented level of access that we now have of each other's lives. We've been let into our teammates' homes. We oftentimes meet their significant others, their kids, their pets. We see their decor. We see them in baseball caps and t-shirts. I mean, it's just been this fascinating learning experience that I think so many of us have had in 2020 so far. At least I have, and I would assume many are feeling quite similar. So that's where we've come from, just looking at the work from home dynamic. Where we're at today, and this is data that comes from Gallup. So according to Gallup's data, 62% of US employees are working from home due to the current pandemic. And of employees surveyed, again, this is according to Gallup, that 78% of those who are working remotely are reporting greater productivity. I think there's some data out there, I've read some recently, that is showing quite the opposite, that productivity is starting to erode a little bit. And I think a lot of that is coming from burnout and people being unable to draw lines between when work stops and when life starts and vice versa. I've heard the saying, as opposed to work-life balance, we're now living at work because all of us are working from home, or so many of us are working from home. So super interesting. I think a point that I want to make on this particular slide is for every data point that is showing increases in productivity, there is data out there that is showing just the opposite, which I'll go back to my original comment that I have more questions than I do answers right now on a lot of this stuff. A couple of additional data points around the work from home. 59% of workers surveyed by Gallup who have been working from home or working from anywhere during the pandemic actually prefer to continue to work remotely. And 54% of office workers would be willing to quit their job in favor for one that would allow them to work remotely. So some pretty interesting data, again, coming from Gallup. Interestingly, looking at kind of the perspective, one quick data point, looking at the perspective of how employees are viewing what's happening right now versus how the organizations or the senior leaders of those organizations are viewing things. If you look at the data point on the left, believing that the organization is helping the staff learn the skills that they need to adapt to what's happening, you can see the discrepancy. The middle data point, believing that the organization is supporting both the physical and emotional health, pretty big delta there as well. And then the delta between the employee and the employer on providing the organization, providing clear guidelines and expectations for how our organization will work as we continue to sort of race into this uncharted territory. I think it's just really interesting when looking at the disconnect that exists, which to me, again, begs the opportunity to engage in a lot more conversation and ask these questions and continue to work towards closing this gap. At the beginning of this year, Deloitte released their, I believe it was their 20th annual Human Capital Trends Report. And one of the topics that had gained a tremendous spotlight in this report was this new sort of frontier that they are referring to as a sense of belonging. And when we think about how to improve culture, particularly where everybody is geographically separated or dispersed, I think it just shines an even brighter light on how important this is and sort of that collision between culture and belonging. Obviously, culture, really, I think standing for the way work gets done. I've also heard a great definition of culture, that culture is who you are on your worst day as an organization. That's the true measure of your culture. The sense of belonging, I think, is something that can really shine a bright light on this question of how do we improve culture when we aren't able to see one another in the office and take advantage of so many of those serendipitous office collisions that would happen in the morning at coffee, before and after meetings in conference rooms, the random collisions in the hallway. What Deloitte shined a bright light on is that there are three aspects that really play into this sense of belonging. And I think this sets up a really interesting framework for how to think about improving culture while we are in this work from anywhere environment. And they're essentially three building blocks. The first is comfort. Has the organization actually created an environment where people feel respected and treated fairly? Once you've met that hurdle or that initial bar, the next level is what they refer to as connection, where the team actually feels a deep feeling that they've got meaningful relationships with their colleagues, as well as a connection to the purpose and values of the organization. And if you can get those two layers nailed, from there is what Deloitte has said, that where contribution really begins to accelerate and take effect, that individuals see how their talents and efforts do make a meaningful difference in what's happening. And I think, so much can be talked about related to these three particular layers of this work from home environment, I do want to say that as I reflected on the Human Capital Trends report, the percentage of senior leaders who were surveyed that believe that a sense of belonging is critical to driving organizational performance was one of the highest percentages that Deloitte had ever seen at 93%. Just a rate of consensus that oftentimes is never that high. And so there's really something happening here around this notion of ensuring that everybody, regardless of where they're sitting, feels that they are really part of something larger than themselves, as evidenced by the feeling of comfort, connection, and inevitably a sense of contribution. That 93% breaks down into this readiness gap, as they call it, that of the organizations who said fostering a sense of belonging is very important over the next 12 to 18 months, but only 13% of those said that they are very ready to address this trend. And again, this data comes prior to the pandemic really coming on strong. So I think this data as a leading indicator of where organizations were already thinking and feeling about how important sense of belonging in culture is, I think as a result of what's been happening over the last 7-8 months, is likely heightened in its importance. And while I have a variety of different anecdotes and stories, I thought, depending upon how many people we have, so Lindsay, it looks like we've got 10, 11 folks with us. I think it'd be really helpful, again, just given how, wide open this space is right now. We can do one of two things. I'd love your guidance on this. Should we do small breakout rooms, maybe 3 people, just to give everybody a chance? Or do you think, knowing your knowledge of the group and the people here today, would it be better to do this in one large group? I'd love a little guidance from you.
I think maybe we should do 2 groups. So 2 groups of 5, and then we'll all circle back and share our key findings.
That sounds awesome. Yeah. And I would love, when Lindsay puts us into these breakouts, I think it'll be randomized. So I'm going to ask that based on the group you get put into, the person with the first name, alphabetical by first name, if the person with the letter nearest A would please be kind of the room champion, if you will, and sort of just take down some of the notes of, based on everybody's experiences, what are the things around culture and creating this sense of belonging and really looking to do what we can, knowing what we know? What are those things that you in your organizations have stopped doing as a result of the work from home, work from anywhere? What are the things you started doing? And what are some things that you have continued to do or really feel like are working and you're going to continue to do them? I think just getting some feedback from the group and then socializing some of these ideas in addition to some stories that I'll likely share when we come back would be really, really helpful. So again, a person with the first name closest to the letter A, just please be our room champion. And Lindsay, what do you think, about 15 minutes or so, just to have a quick discussion amongst the groups?
I think that works. But before we do that, I'm just going to ask the group, I'm going to send out a poll really quick and see, and just make sure that we want to do the breakout rooms versus the group chat. So let me just breakout. Okay. There. All right. Everybody tell me what you want to do this morning. We can either do the group chat or the breakout room. All right. I'm glad we asked, because it looks like everyone would prefer to do the group chat versus the breakout room. So
the power of democracy in action.
I love it. Perfect. So let's go ahead and start the conversation as a group. Brian, I'll let you kick it off.
Yeah, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I don't think we need to see the questions. It's the simple sort of stop, start, continue model. I am going to, you know what? I'm going to call on Brian, since he has an amazing first name. So Brian, if I could be so cruel and put you on the spot, purely out of name recognition. So I'm biased here. Maybe you could share, since we've not met before, it's a pleasure to meet you. Maybe you could share a little bit about your organization and your response to, what activities that you've started, stopped, or are continuing to do.
Yeah, I'm Brian Callett, and I work with Lindsay at Fenimore Craig, do marketing and business development for the firm. Some of the activities, today is my first day back in the office in probably 12 days, a couple weeks. So it's always interesting to come back in. One of the activities I guess I've started and I've taken advantage of that hour of commute time and tried to energize myself during that. So I've started playing the guitar, trying to teach myself how to do that. I've taken a lot more yoga classes to improve my body also. And for work for me, I'm a collaborative person, and I like to stroll the halls and talk to people and get ideas from them, see what's working for them and what's going on with them. So picking up the phone and actually getting someone has been one of the biggest changes that I've had to work with. So I guess those are kind of my two biggest changes that I've had through the process.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian. Anybody have a burning desire? Maybe do the hand raise, or Brian, maybe what I'll do is have you call on someone so that I'm not the bad guy every time.
Okay, well, I've got the person right below me on my screen is Randy. And I think he's on mute.
I am unmuting. Morning all. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Brian. And Brian, we know each other over travel, so good to see you on screen. Good to see others that are there. Lindsay, you know I'm a big fan, so this is a great topic. I'm sort of on the other side of the spectrum. I actually have a company in the well-being space. I'm the guy that owns WEN, actually Find Your WEN. We help people with their career, their being, and their health. I won't give full dissertation, but proud to say I was ahead of the COVID curve. All the work I've done over the years has been online via distance. So we actually have WEN advisors throughout the country. They're independent. They all work from home. In full candor, I've worked from home over the years. We do have certain remote offices. So from my side, Brian, and I want to stay on point with the topic, the remote part and the working online, in again, full transparency, I've been doing it for 20, 25 years. So when I see these things, even these Zoom calls, and quite frankly, no, I haven't had Zoom calls over all this time. The telephone still works. You meet people for coffee, you do what you need to do. You have other meetings, lawyer's office, et cetera. So not that big a deal for me. And actually our business has grown. I'm proud of that because of the via distance online part. The big challenge for me, and Brian, you hit a chord. I have two teenagers as well. I have twins. I have a boy and a girl. So the fact that they're home, that dynamic of everybody being home pretty much all the time, that's been a change for me. That's been, and I have to walk the walk as far as, okay, if you're the guy that owns a well-being company, pay attention. But so the work-life balance piece, weirdly enough, almost not typical for a guy that works from home. You should have this figured out, buddy. So it was more the family time. And Brian, I have no advice. I agree on the insurance side, but the teenagers today, in today's world, we're living, similar to your quote, Brian, that you started with, there's no handbook on this. So that's been my biggest learning curve, the parenting part, and I have no complaints, but the parenting part, the communication, the family structure, and still paying attention, because Brian knows me, those of you that don't know me, I'm 110% work comes first. So that balance has been the biggest piece for me. And I guess I love, just in summary, right, I love the comfort, connection, contribution. I haven't seen that study before. It's sort of what companies, we now work with businesses all over trying to help them. Everybody's trying to figure out their culture. I won't put everybody in a bottle that they're all trying to figure it out, because some are doing better than others, but it's a huge topic. People need to do better. People need to take this seriously. And I'll just close and leave you with this. My take is the new normal is not coming back. New normal is going to be new life and what you want it to be. And I think people have to own that a little bit more, take more responsibility. And Brian, that's where all the change and all the new stuff is going to come in going forward. So I'm just proud to be part of these groups, to participate and be hands-on. Lindsay, kudos to you, because I think this is a great topic. Thank you, Brian.
Randy. It's great to see you. Thanks for the feedback and insight there. Something you said triggers a thought and a question for me, and that is, from a cultural standpoint, so many of our colleagues and teammates are dealing with kids at home who are of some sort of school age. And I think what it brings up is this notion that seems to be gaining some steam of treating everybody fairly, but not everybody equally. And I'm just curious if anyone around that particular topic, this notion of fair but not equal, if they've had any instances, again, to really focus on culture, we're talking about how do we help each member of our teams operate at their peak performance level. And now that they're likely dealing with a scenario, if they are indeed working from home, if they've got kids, balancing all of that, that is really, really challenging. And I'm curious if anyone here has had experiences, whether themselves personally or with teammates or those that they lead, around that topic of helping treat everyone fairly, but not necessarily equally. Any feedback on that, or am I bringing up a topic that is not at all of interest? I see a smile from Michelle, so I don't know what to make of that.
All right, I'll go. Only because I have to jump off here in a couple of minutes, and I feel really badly about that. But we've had quite a bit of that here. We have several. We're an architecture firm, and we have several professionals who have been humbled because they have to try and teach their children at home while they're, still trying to keep up with their projects and such. And, I feel like we've never really I don't feel like it's ever been an issue. I don't know, I could be talking like the Wizard of Oz, the person behind the curtain that isn't in touch with the rest of the people. But I really feel like, we go and, to great lengths to treat people fairly and, to make sure that everybody's, got a level playing ground, and I think everybody's just in support of everybody else. So in our office, I don't get the feeling that people are like, oh, well, this person gets to do this, but I don't, but what do I get to do? I think people truly do see it as, in order for my teammate to be successful, this is what we need to do in order to accommodate this person. So we could be the anomaly, or I could just be completely wrong. But thank you. I have to dip out. I'm going to listen to the rest of the recorded session, and I hope you guys have a great day.
Thanks, Michelle. Appreciate it. What about I'm curious from a connection standpoint, again, looking at the comfort connection contribution. I mean, one of the things that obviously has suffered mightily is those in-office collisions, for folks that are used to being around their teammates Monday through Friday, or at least a handful of days a week, a lot of that being ripped away from us. Curious around examples or ways in which connection has been a focal point. Has it been, I've obviously heard things, Zoom happy hours are happening, or different types of get-togethers, doing home tours, somebody taking their camera, their laptop and walking around their house and showing their colleagues different rooms in their house, or grabbing some sort of a very special possession, a family heirloom of some kind, and using that almost like an adult show and tell, what we used to do back in kindergarten, to create these opportunities for connection. Again, now that I think we've been let into our colleagues' homes in a way that frankly had never happened in the past. Curious if anyone has additional examples or ways in which you're experiencing a sense of connectivity with your teammates, if indeed you are remote.
So I can talk a little bit about that. I'm a business development professional. I'm not marketing. Our marketing professional, Laura Oswald, was just on here, but she had to jump off. She was having technical issues, which is also a thing. All these Zoom meetings and stuff. She's in the office today. I'm not in the office. she was having a lot of trouble with things freezing up. So that is, a difficulty technology, but then also on the positive side, to additionally connect to each other. I'm back in the office 2 days a week, but Teams meetings. So Zoom is great, but for an organization, we're a CPA firm and our audit professionals needed to communicate with each other. Everybody needs to communicate with each other. We have weekly internal meetings as well around segments that we can help our clients and our prospects. So in order to continue to have those meetings, even because when you're in the office,
Oh, Deborah, I lost you, but maybe it's me. Can anyone, Lindsay, you're shaking your head. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I can't hear Deborah.
Okay. How apropos to be. No, there you're back. You're back.
has helped tremendously because we spin up Teams meetings real quick. I have a lot of business that I do across the country with some of our professionals, and I can call them and do a face-to-face meeting just real quick after we do another video chat. It has really brought our world smaller to be able to do this really quickly and add people onto calls. I had no idea that technology existed. I didn't know it came with Microsoft 365, and it is phenomenal for our company. That said, we've also had company-wide Teams meetings in order to kind of bring people together. And Laura, I want to give her a shout out. One of the things that we did that has kind of slowed down, but it's not as active as it was, is at the beginning, during the first 2 to 3 months, she created what was called the Quarantine Times. And so we had pictures of dogs, like my Great Dane back here in the chair, and people's kids and who they were working with at home, their pictures of their home, things that they were doing to keep themselves sane, essentially, when we were all in lockdown. Some of that has waned a little bit, but everybody liked it so much that we're continuing the newsletter. And of course, she's phenomenal in marketing, so it looked beautiful. And she had it all digital and stuff. It looked really nice. So I would say that that's one of the things that we added and are continuing to do, and then did, but maybe slowed down the Quarantine Time so much and changed the name.
How often were you doing it, did you say?
They were doing it once a week to begin with. And then I think they backed down to about once every month. And now it's once every couple months they do an update, because we still have a good amount that are working from home that don't feel comfortable coming back to the office. And it just kind of depends. We're back and forth. We've really learned a different way to do business through this entire thing. Auditors thought they had to be sitting in our clients' offices, and it does help with that communication with their CFOs, but they do really, really well remotely as well. So, and it makes our clients very comfortable if they don't want them to come into the office, that they're just right there on these Teams meetings. And it's gone real well for the whole organization.
I'm curious with the the introduction of Teams and how you've been using it for meetings, whether it's with clients or with the organization. If you guys had any experiences using it for non-work related collisions and gatherings, or has it been primarily for meetings and what you might normally do if you were together in the office?
It's mostly, Laura and I communicate all the time, being BD and marketing. And so we go back and forth quite a bit. We had a happy hour. So I have the Phoenix office that I'm a business development manager for, and then I have a national practice as well. So our national business development professionals, we all never get to see each other unless it's one time a year at a venue. So we had a couple Teams happy hours together for everybody across the country to sort of gather and hang out. They did do, and it's work related, weekly sales meetings for us, like the BD Teams meetings, but people would dial in early and talk for 5 or 10 minutes before we ended up doing. So we had that camaraderie and that connection with each other. It really helped a lot.
Yeah, I bet. Thanks,
Yeah.
Deborah. Appreciate it.
It's nice to see you, Brian. It's been
Yeah,
years.
you as well. I think the last time I saw you was like during Accelerant time.
Yes, back
like,
in the day when it first came to town.
oh
Yeah.
my God, that was so long.
Yeah.
It feels like ages
Such
ago.
a small world, right?
No, I
Exactly.
know. Good to see you as well.
Good to see you too.
Cheryl, if you're there, I love your avatar, and I would love if there's any insight feedback on the discussion that you'd love to weigh in on.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying just listening to everybody's comments. This is my little grandson who's a year old now, and part of sharing, our world, as you mentioned, about home or family. And I think that a couple of people have mentioned the Deloitte study, and I think that's an awesome roadmap for a lens to look through. What is the end game? What are we trying to achieve in this world? And it doesn't matter whether it's in person or remotely, there are mechanisms to get to those. One of the things that jumped out at me, so I think we're doing some things right. We've had more all hands meetings. We've actually had more communication than I've been at the firm 24 years now than I ever remember having. And part of that is our CEO is fantastic about communication in general, but the nature of the virtual work environment has forced us to try to get in front of issues and stay transparent. And here's what's happening, here's what's going to happen, here's what just happened. And I think that's something that even if a percentage of folks return to working routinely in the office, we would absolutely want to continue. Something else that I've done is our one-on-one connections. I loved, I think it was Deborah who was saying dialing in early. I can't remember who mentioned that. I actually think that's brilliant. I think we may want to include that as part of our invitations for people to come in 5 or 10 minutes early to chat. And I do think sometimes we kind of are nostalgic about those run-ins. We're in a law firm, and there's so much of an emphasis on billable hours that, as a practical matter, the run-ins, they were connecting points, but they typically weren't very long. And so that's where I think those 5 or 10 minute touching bases might help meet that need just a tad. The last point I wanted to make was you had a slide about what the employees are seeing and what the executives are seeing. And I'm absolutely thinking we need to sit with these details. The ones about that they have what they need to work remotely, not just technologically, but what are our expectations? What does success look like working remotely? I think we need to do a better job communicating that. I can only speak for our firm, but it really morphed into something much bigger than we originally anticipated. And, the 2 weeks turned to 3 months, turned to 6 months, and we communicated with our group. We think this is going to continue under the COVID environment, probably until the end of Q1 or even into Q2. But then even from a broader perspective, what is our mobile workforce or work from anywhere strategy? And I think it was Randy that said there isn't really a normal anymore. It's life. How do we structure that? But I think part of the downfall in those percentages is related to the fact that we were making decisions on the fly, and we thought we were communicating things, but just like any sort of emergency or urgent situation, it's not as structured and cohesive, and we need to go back and say, oh, okay, what got lost in the shuffle? So lots of great points you've made and the group has made.
Well, thank you. Thanks for adding your voice to the mix. It's interesting reflecting on those data points. In particular, the middle one showed the delta between how the senior executives and the employees felt that the organization is paying strict attention to both the physical and emotional well-being of the team. And Randy, this probably hits square in the middle of the work that you've been doing for so long. Even prior to COVID, I think there was either a Cigna or Humana study that showed that the behavioral health costs inside of organizations were skyrocketing at a 10x over the just everyday healthcare costs. So clearly there's this emotional, mental tidal wave that had been building. I think COVID, likely accelerated it. Some of that could show up in these numbers here. I think what's interesting about that is, while perhaps productivity gains have been achieved, at the expense of what? And I think already there's this sense of a sense of disconnection, despite how technologically connected we all are. To hear about or read about a study where behavioral and mental health care costs inside of organizations were rising at such a rate, I think is an indicator of a silent epidemic of sorts that had already been happening. And if people aren't feeling emotionally and mentally well, it's really hard to operate and reach that level of maximum contribution using the comfort, connection, contribution. So I always seem to zero in on that connection aspect of their model. And are people feeling a deep sense of connectivity to some group of folks within their lives? And because we spend so much time with our work colleagues, why are we not taking advantage of a deep, meaningful connection? Maybe not with everybody, but with a handful of people. Maybe it's one or two people. And one other data point that I think just proves why that matters, Gallup, that has been studying employee engagement since 1996 when they launched their Q12 survey. One of the questions of the Q12 survey is, do I have a best friend at work? And while that question has been controversial over the years, employees who answer yes consistently show a 7x in their level of engagement. So if I have someone at work who is not only my colleague and I can rely on for the work product, but is somebody that I really connect with, who I consider to be a good friend, that I'm 7 times more likely to bring what I have to bear at my highest level consistently, 7 times more. I mean, there's something there that, like, business being personal or business not being personal, I think is again, I'm biased, but I think we're missing on some of these human opportunities, and all of this plays into improving culture. I don't know that I have a question in there, Randy, but given that this is such an emphasis in so much of your work, curious if you have anything you'd like to add to that.
Well, you touched a lot of chords, right? Because I've been following Gallup over the years. So pre-COVID, 2/3 of our population, working population, were still unproductive, unhappy. That was pre-COVID. So now put COVID on and all the stuff we're talking about, great conversation. So I'm a little biased from my end because I think this new normal, new life is going to give people a sense of new identity. Am I really happy where I am? The stats aren't out yet, but they will be. You'll have a field day with it of how many people changed jobs, how many people changed industries, how many people reevaluated the culture they had or didn't have. And I think the reality is everybody works to make money. Now I think everybody has a different mindset. What am I doing with my days? How can I have more purpose? How can I have more meaning? Still, I want to get paid. I still want to contribute. So I think it's opened up, not for everybody, but I don't think it's going to be the norm, but I think there will be a percentage. Lindsay's shaking her head, so hopefully I get a consensus here. I think there will be new data over time that COVID-19 has helped our workforce, has helped this productivity, has helped redefine this culture, and quite frankly, maybe even put people in their own business, give them a new identity. If I'm working from home and I get to do what I want to do anyway, why shouldn't I start my own business? Young people included. So I think there's a whole plethora of positives, Brian, that are going to be coming. It's challenging to talk about that now when we're in these, as you say, unprecedented times. And now it's going to get worse again. Again, regardless which side of the fence you're on, numbers are going up. People have to be more careful. It gives us pause. And I think the key, or at least my takeaway is, because I got to walk the walk, well, what's my pause? What am I taking away here? How can I do things better? How can I change the culture? How can I help more people? And I think that's been missing from our population for a long time. Fits into your conscious capitalism, fits into Arizona way of life. How can people help people more? This is the time. And yeah, you can do it remotely. That I will guarantee you, Brian. You can do it remotely. You can make a difference in people's lives. You don't physically have to be in an office to touch somebody's life or make somebody's life better.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Can I throw out another, just maybe a quick topic? Lindsay, I saw you unmute, so I don't want to steal maybe what might have been coming. No? Okay.
You're good.
I would maybe, well, I was going to say a show of hands, but since I can't see everybody, I think an interesting topic around this, how do you improve culture? How do you actually translate an organization's culture for a brand new employee today? If I'm joining your company and I'm going to orient and assimilate virtually, where I'm not going to sit in a training room with a cohort of my teammates. I'm not going to have the opportunity to, have a coffee in the morning with a new person each day for my first month, or go to lunch or join team meetings in person. What does that orientation assimilation process look like? Not only to make people feel comfortable and connected so that they get the contribution to that level, but how do we effectively translate culture when you're not mired in it the way you would be if you were sitting in a physical space? I think it's a really interesting question. And again, I have more questions than I do answers, but these are the questions that I'm wrestling with. I have some ideas, but again, I think we're at the front end of a reimagining how we did so many things that we just became habitual. Anybody have experience either in your own business of onboarding new teammates, or maybe as a coach or a consultant in helping businesses rethink their onboarding and assimilation processes?
I was typing, Brian, but I'm too slow on the type. Have the head person or the top level person reach out directly. So if that's your culture, if you just brought somebody in, you hired someone, you can have, and I'm not a fan of it, but you got to play, have a 10-minute cup of coffee over Zoom. And that would be a good moment for the company or the lead of the company to have. And that person who just got off the Zoom call said, oh my God, the head guy, he or she just had a cup of coffee with me. They're busy, they're running the whole company. They just made 10 minutes for me. That could be the best intro training ever. That's just off the top of my head.
Yeah, I agree. Lindsay, you had a thought?
Yeah, it's actually been highlighted throughout our firm in the sense that we're going through a merger right now. So now we're onboarding 100 new individuals that live in California. We have team members on our side working from home. And so it's really pushed our team to get creative with that process. I think the biggest thing is clear communication, which Cheryl had mentioned before, but also just showing that we care and that we go the extra mile. Swag has been one of the best ways that we've been able to do that, because everybody loves to receive care packages. Some individuals working in the office, or we're sending stuff to their homes. So we've sent cookies and backpacks and mouse pads and I mean a number of different things, but that's gone a long way, much further than I would have expected. Another cool thing that we've done because of the merger, but also because we're onboarding new people, is creating that ally buddy system where we have that main point of contact. So they do have that go-to friend or resource that they can go and ask additional questions of. And we've looked to connect them at multiple different levels. So yes, they have their one go-to for one-off questions. They feel like there's an open door to the executive team that they can go and ask them questions. We've introduced them to the practice group level. So now they know who those resources are. And we put together a welcome kit through that merger process, kind of outlining and explaining how everything works and who does what and who's in what office. And it seems kind of overly simplified, but by communicating and going that extra mile, I think it really goes a long way, and that's helped us.
I bet. Yeah, it's that swag comment, that certainly rings true. My wife, who's been with Zillow now almost for 2 years, and seeing how often some sort of a care package arrives at our house it's amazing. I mean, one of the things, so Zillow was very anti-work from home at the very beginning. Like, they just always believed, and the leadership team believed, that in order to really achieve high performance, you need to have people together. Well, obviously that got disrupted at the beginning of the year, and they have since drastically changed their, 180 degrees, where they're lightening real estate loads and giving people the option to work from home indefinitely. I mean, just a rapid change of mindset. One of the things that Zillow did right out of the gate, and it's amazing that they're able to do this, right? Not every company can, but in addition to normal like swag and some care packages, they sent money to every single employee, $200 to every employee, for them to, if they needed, a light for their computer or wanted to buy a new monitor or a new chair, like whatever it is, here's a $200 allowance to outfit your home office so that you could operate at a level of productivity, hopefully equal to what you had in the office. And again, I know that not every company can do that, but those small gestures, Lindsay, to your point, I think go a really, really long way at communicating that the organization cares deeply about the people.
So there's one individual on this call that I think the group would love to hear from and benefit from hearing from, which is Sarah on this call. I recently interviewed Sarah for the A to Z BizLink podcast, and we focused on the topic specifically around culture. So Sarah, do you have any ideas around today's conversation, or I know you have wonderful team building ideas too that if you'd be open to sharing with the group, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, totally. So I actually have a new person starting tomorrow. So we were really excited for this webinar, and I did a couple of things for her because we actually haven't remote onboarded anyone either. So I, reached out to her. I bought her a new computer. I set it up and I changed the background to say welcome Casey. So when she opens it and turns it on, it's going to say welcome. But I tried to set everything up so that she can just plug it in at home and go, which is a barrier that a lot of us have to think about, now that they don't have IT support. And even myself this morning, I was having technical issues, and, it just takes time out of our day. And then I did order a little box called, I think it's like natural succulents or something from Etsy. And so it's like, hey, we're looking forward to growing with you. And it's like a little plant and a bath bomb and a candle that smells like Christmas, and just something nice. And then making sure she has what she needs. What's surprising is that the organization she came from, I said, do you need a monitor and a keyboard? And she goes, I would love to have all those things. And so to me, that sounded like she didn't already have those things. And I know that she's working remote in her old position. The other thing that I did was just kind of engage with her via email and phone a lot, and then add her to our team distribution list. So sure, she'll have 200 emails when she logs on, but she'll kind of be able to catch up in some of these back and forth team conversations and get some of the history. And then I'm also going to meet her for breakfast, and she was open to that. And so we're just going to chat and kind of take it day by day versus overly structuring, which we have a tendency to do. So we're just going to, every day check in on her progress and see how she's doing, and just let her ease in. And then one thing I do that I will continue to do, remote or not, is I always have people start on Wednesday, because they get a few days, maybe they, quit, and their last day would be a Friday, which is typical. So then they have a couple days to relax. And then when they start with us, they only have 3 days of filling their brain with, everything they're going to forget by Monday. But at least then they're not exhausted by the end of the week. It's like, okay, wow, I'm really excited now to work with this organization. And the next week feels like a good full week. So that's kind of a couple things that we're doing right now.
Has that Wednesday thing, Sarah, has that been a custom for your company for a long time, or is that new?
That's been our custom, I'd say, for at least 3 years, probably.
That's I like that a lot. That's a really cool idea. I think about when one of my daughters started 6th grade, they had them start on a Friday. So they just had the one day and then had the weekend. It's, I guess we don't grow much beyond the overwhelming factor, right? You start something brand new and it's a lot to take in. So to, have 3 days is still a heck of a lot, whereas 5 is just so overwhelming. That's a really cool idea.
Yeah, it seems to go well. And so, as long as people are open to meeting in person, we're going to try to have like a team lunch on Friday. We normally would dress up and do this whole Halloween potluck thing. But we're just trying to get together and, when it makes sense, and people's schedules, and just be overly flexible and understanding. And we're not doing any of the Zoom. I think maybe we did one Zoom happy hour, but people were already over it. So we did like a Zoom Pictionary, which was fun, but I do miss those. I like the 5-minute log on early, because we're missing those kind of chats and checking in on people's well-being, which is hard. So I don't know if anyone has like a solution for how we can modify those water cooler conversations.
Well, I think we're getting near the end. Lindsay, I'm assuming we probably hard stop here at the bottom of the hour.
Yeah, we probably will look to wrap it up, which of course, I think part of the reason why we do this is just to make introductions to other key resources here in the business community. And so happy to pass along Brian's contact information. And well, I think half of you are listed in the resources for growth publications, so you can probably find a lot of you there. Or if you need me to make some email intros, of course, would happy to do that. One thing that's top of mind for me though, is we're all in business planning season. We're thinking and preparing for 2021, looking to redefine our mission, our vision, our values for next year, and further define what culture looks like. So would welcome anyone's closing thoughts as far as how we can look to further communicate our culture, or what we're thinking about implementing as we communicate that to our team members here at the new year.
Lindsay, are you referring to the culture of A to Z BizLink, the group?
Actually, for your own individual organizations, one thing that was top of mind for me was when Sarah was talking, it reminded me about how her organization actually lists their vision and values. It's posted in their office, and so everybody goes in the office, they see it every single day, they live it, they breathe it. However, we're not going in the office anymore, so how will we look to communicate that if we don't have that signage or something in our office?
Gotcha.
I did actually, because of that, we added it to our performance review, which we do every 6 months. One of the questions is, give an example of how this employee is exhibiting a value and one example of how they could do better.
That's a great idea. Thanks for sharing that, Sarah. All right, well, I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Virtual round of applause for Mr. Brian Mohr for helping lead this conversation. Really appreciate you, all of your insight and your guidance. This was a difficult conversation because, as we've all kind of discussed and realized ourselves, there's no right or wrong answer and no clear guidelines or playbook for this. So I envision that we'll probably need to kick off this conversation again in one of our events in 2021. But until then, if there's anything that I can personally do to be a resource, certainly let me know. Happy to help. But thank you again for your continued support, and hope to see you all soon.
Thanks, everybody. It's good to see everyone.